All righty, here we go. It's a brand new Flyers Daily for March 11th, 2024. Flyers Daily, as usual, brought to you by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. 7-game homestand. It's been a homestand from hell, frankly, to start with. But it continues tonight as the Ottawa Senators, Claude Giroux, coming back to Philadelphia as a member of the Senators tonight. And they are in playoff position as we speak. It's been a while in Ottawa. It's been a tough road there. It's been a tough rebuild, and they made a deal at the deadline, sending Josh Norris to Buffalo for Dylan Cousins. Flyers and Sens tonight. First 4 games of the homestand. Flyers got beat 6-3 by Calgary, 4-1 by Winnipeg, 4-1 by Seattle Saturday, and then Sunday, New Jersey, a final score of 3-1. They got to find some goal scoring. Scoring 1 goal a game, it just ain't going to do it. Even the last win they had was a 2-1 shootout win, so they only scored 1 goal in that game as well. They've got to find some offense, but they got to find some offense, not at the cost of defense. We'll see if they're able to do that tonight when Ottawa comes to town. And interested to see this Ottawa team as well. They got some pieces I really like on the year. 62 games, 32, 25, and 5. They've won their last 2. They are 4-5 and 1 in their last 10, -1 in goal differential. They're sitting in the 4th spot right now of the Atlantic Division of the Eastern Conference, and they have moved down from wild card 1 to wild card 2. Columbus in wild card 1 right now for the Eastern Conference. What is the captain done there in this season? The former Flyer captain, I should say, Claude Giroux. He is on their team 5th in scoring, 62 games. He has got 12 goals, 27 assists, 39 points, -3 on the year, 18.48 averaging in ice time, 3 power play goals, and 9 power play assists for Claude Giroux. And what's he done since he left the Flyers, since that trade that sent him to Florida at the deadline a few years ago, where the Flyers got the first-round pick and Owen Tippett? Since he left the Flyers at 1,000 games on the button with 900 points. He had 291 goals, 609 assists for 900 points as a Philadelphia Flyer in 1,000 games. In Florida, he only played 18 games there in the regular season, 3 goals, 20 assists, 23 points, was a +7. And now in his 3rd season in Ottawa, 226 games, 68 goals, 114 assists, and 182 points. So by my math, that's 195 points, 71 goals, and 134 assists. Really good numbers. And he's at the twilight of his career. He's not young anymore. He's been around for a while. And it's almost weird to say, he's 37 years old. You don't think him, you don't remember him that way. Since Owen Tippett was a big part of that trade, obviously, and the number 1 pick for the Flyers, Owen Tippett in 236 games, 78 goals, 67 assists, and 145 points. So about 40 points down on Giroux and slightly less games played. Good numbers. And I'm not comparing him to Giroux. That would be totally unfair. He's not Claude Giroux. Totally different kind of game. The hockey IQ that Claude Giroux plays with, probably he and Couturier of the last, since 2000, the year 2000, highest hockey IQ players that I've seen with the Flyers, Giroux and Couturier. And you saw it immediately when Giroux came up with the Flyers, when his skills weren't completely honed in just yet. Was never really particularly a great skater, but he could just anticipate plays and read plays unbelievably well. So it'll be the Flyers against the Ottawa Senators tonight in the middle game of this 7-game homestand, one of the middle games tonight for the Flyers. And again, they got to find a way to score. They got to find a way to keep the puck out of the net. Who's the goaltender tonight? That decision is suddenly in flux. A lot of question marks for the Flyers coming forward down the stretch here as the trade deadline is now passed and kind of the sizzle has kind of worn off the steak a little bit in regards to the deadline. Now it's the tough period of a team that's, again, been depleted of some of their players heading down the stretch and limping down the stretch. We saw this last year. They traded Sean Walker. They traded Sean Walker when they also had Nick Seeler was hurt. Rasmus Ristolainen was hurt. And they really limped down the stretch. And we may see that again this year. And the lasting impression may be this limping hockey team coming into an offseason. But this is part of the rebuild. There was a lot of messages on the YouTube thread from yesterday's episode with Bill and I to varying degrees. And one of the messages from Scotty Arman said, I think getting rid of Kuzmenko was a mistake. He said, you can't judge what happened on his previous teams. Look at the Panthers did with some of their players who were not successful on previous teams. A third-round pick isn't worth much. Did Briere owe the team a chance to make the playoffs? Now they have no chance. Well, I would say that I don't think Andrei Kuzmenko was going to be the reason why they would or now would not make the playoffs. 5 points in 7 games. He was good here. I don't want to disparage him. The Panthers got players, good players that put up good numbers on a crap organization like Buffalo. That's what they did. Kuzmenko, you can look at his past. He has gotten off to bonkers starts before, and it's faded every single time. So that's a huge buyer beware. He may come in, and I believe this, when a player is playing for his next contract, that is the ultimate motivation. And he's playing for his NHL life, frankly. Being now sent from 2 teams in Vancouver where he had a really good first year and then just fizzled. And then in Calgary, we had a good first year and just fizzled. That there's a reputation there now, and it's for a reason. He earned it. He earned the reputation of a player that's not going to be consistent. As I said on yesterday's episode, I think Bill agreed. I thought trading him was a no-brainer, frankly, even for a third-round pick, which I totally agree with you, Adam. I don't think it means a whole heck of a lot of third-round pick, especially when you have as many picks as the Flyers have coming up in the first, second, and third round this year. But I was still for trading him. I would not have looked to re-sign him. We have been through the mill on guys that have offensive upside that don't live up to it. They just traded a couple of guys in Frost and Farabee that we sat here and kept waiting for these numbers to fulfill, but they constantly and consistently didn't. I don't want to do that again. And a player like Kuzmenko, to me, like I said to Bill, would take up a lot of bandwidth of coaching because you got to make sure he's on point all the time. Because for some reason, he fizzles. He fizzles out. So I would not have been in favor of that. Now, a lot of the other comments regarding yesterday's episode are about the GM, Danny Briere, the job he's done. Some people were complimentary. Some people were not complimentary. Don't think that Danny is doing a good job. And ultimately, we'll find out that Danny Briere and this regime, Keith Jones, will be measured ultimately on how this rebuild goes. Not this part of it. The grades so far are incomplete. It's like the first couple of tests of the first marking period in a lot of ways. Stage 1 of the rebuild, which I think we are just exiting right now, is like the first marking period of 4 when you were in school. You can pull your grade up or your grade can sink. Ultimately, it'll be about how the team now builds. They've been torn down over the last 2 years. Again, 19 players of the 35 players that Danny Briere inherited when he took the job are gone. 10 of them were trades. There were several of guys that didn't fit, didn't get re-signed. There were 2 buyouts in Tony DeAngelo and Cam Atkinson. So there's been a lot of movement here. But now what matters and what ultimately Danny Briere will be judged on, he has got a ton of assets and draft picks. Not a ton of prospects, and certainly no super high-end prospects. I don't want to call Mishkov a prospect because he's an NHL player. But as August Drums 1247 said on the stream, he said the draft picks are complete gambles. He said, I don't understand why people overvalue picks. How do you build a team solely on picks? Doesn't seem very smart. They need a veteran leader to start, which they don't have. Coots is a joke. Yeah, I disagree with that. And he's certainly not viewed that way in that locker room. He said the captain can't even win a faceoff when the game is online. He's one of the top faceoff guys in the league, by the way. That shouldn't cost a lot of money, but I'm sitting here wondering when Danny is going to make a move that actually makes the team better. So far, they are going backwards. That was the point of the first part of this rebuild, to go backwards. You go backwards to ultimately move forward. I don't know if, August, you just don't understand how rebuilds work in sports, but you have to go backwards a little bit. Some people want them to continue going backwards and go backwards farther. And while I agree with August that picks are a gamble, they are an unknown commodity. No doubt about it. And I've said it before, these NHL GMs and some fans treat these first-round picks like they're gold bullion. They are not. Sometimes you got to use those picks because of the value they have around the league to go from the picks of an unknown commodity to using them for a known commodity. A guy that has already projected or been in the NHL, or even a player in the middle of his career. use those picks to attain those kind of players. Further to that, David Vaughn said hockey non-top 15 picks are not exactly useless, but percentage-wise, don't spend more than a cup of coffee in the NHL. Now, first-round picks about 75, 80% make it to the NHL and play 200 games. But again, it is a crapshoot. I don't value draft picks in sports as highly as a lot of other people do, and as highly as a lot of GMs do. Not only that, a first-round pick it's a watch and wait, draft and wait. You got to see how they develop. You got to develop them. The players got to develop through your conversations at the combine and meetings. You got to know if that player is going to be self-motivated, self-accountable, all those things. There's a ton that goes into it. There's a ton of projection. And to couple that when it comes to these draft picks, especially in the NHL, these are kids. Some of these kids don't even have hair under their armpits yet. They're not shaving. They're 18 years old. To project them when they're 22, 23, 26 in the prime of their career is very difficult to do. Now, some teams are better at it than others. No doubt about it. Some GMs can project that better than others. We'll see if that's something that the Flyers do well. I thought they did well last year with Jet Lachenko, and when he was first drafted, there was a lot of outrage. And I think as we saw Jet and we saw the maturity that he has for such a young player and the maturity of his game, that maybe turned some people around. But ultimately, yeah, picks, they are a huge question mark. And I totally agree with those two messages that were put on there. Absolutely agree with those. Now, part of the equation, too, you can't, like August said, you can't just build a team on draft picks. You can't. You have to use all the levers. There's different ways to build teams. You look at the way, Vegas is kind of a weird example because they came in as an expansion team. But if you look at the way Florida won their cup and may go back to another one again this year for a third straight year, if you look at the way Tampa won back-to-back cups, if you look at the way teams around the league, the top teams are built, Colorado, they've all been built in different ways. Ultimately, you got to use a little bit of everything to do it. And you see at the deadline, a lot of these teams, like Toronto, for an example, like Florida again, for example, grabbing guys, sacrificing future first-round picks to still try and get another cup. Pittsburgh's been doing it for years. You have to use all the levers. You have to use the draft and develop model. It's got to be a core principle of it. It's got a big part of it. It's not all of it. You got to use trades. You got to use free agency. I think nowadays you've got to put teams in the squeeze and use offer sheets. You've got to use every lever available to the GM to build a championship caliber team in a 32-team salary capped league. You can't do it solely in the draft. You've never been able to do it solely in the draft. Some teams it's more drafted and developed players than others, but I think you've got to use all of those different levers. And there is very little margin for error for GMs. You make a mistake in a salary cap guaranteed cash league, you don't get a get out of jail free card. You don't. It just doesn't happen. You make that could be a 7-year or 8-year mistake you make on extending a guy or signing a player or trading for a player. You don't get any reprieve from that. You cannot make those mistakes. So it's very difficult. Now, the other thing, last thing I want to talk about in this episode is the one thing about this rebuild that's been unfortunate. Maybe that's the right word. I don't know if it is or not. But it's that, Flyer fans are going through this again, and a team that's not going to make the playoffs or probably not going to make the playoffs this year. I won't say definitively until they're mathematically eliminated. But again, and that hurts and it sucks, especially in this market where it was cup or bust all the time, pre-salary cap, because the Flyers could spend more than other teams, and they did. And when there was a shiny toy out there, they went and got it. But that's not the league anymore. You can't just do that, outspend teams that way anymore because you are in a salary cap league. But the one thing that's happened is it's fractured the fan base to an unbelievable degree. Even people that agree they needed to rebuild, they fight and get vicious about their opinion on how the rebuild should be done. There's just so much division in the fan base right now that there's very little agreement and there is widespread division and disagreement amongst the fan base. And that sucks. Part of being a sports fan is being united in your backing of a team. But when the team goes through what the Flyers have gone through, a lot of it's self-inflicted. Yeah, there's going to be some division on how they need to move forward. But in this world today, in 2025, with social media and the ability to put your opinions out without your face and be nasty because you're not face-to-face and you're a keyboard warrior, is made it very divisive. And that part sucks. It sucks to have to see the division that has taken place and the viciousness of the division. Now, I'm a big boy. I've been in the media for 30 years. I've taken a lot of arrows, and that's fine, totally fine. It doesn't bother me at all. It did earlier in my career. It would affect me when people would, totally say you're an idiot, your opinion's dope. You get to a point where you just don't care about that anymore, what other people think. You have your opinions, and my opinions a lot of times, and some people didn't like some of my opinions on yesterday's episode regarding the torch-sitting Mishkov situation, and that it was something off the ice, probably on the bench, that he was referring to. And hey, that's fine. My opinions are not put out of emotion. I've somehow removed that. Maybe just 30 years being in this business. I don't know. But I do not like to react emotionally. I like to react analytically and read things not through an emotional lens and what I think makes sense based on my experience and my thoughts and the things I value, whether it's in player evaluation, play of a team, or a situation like Mishkov getting benched in that first period. So I think it was John Tortorella told me one time, I don't think this was a conversation on the air, where we were talking about, the criticism that you can get as a coach, especially a coach like him who's polarizing. His wife told him, "It is none of your business what other people think about you." And I thought that was an interesting line. But the division that is widespread in this fan base right now, to me, is it's the crappiest thing about this rebuild. It's the crappiest thing. And the viciousness with which Flyer fans disagree with other Flyer fans, and the way they pseudo-verbalize that in social media, it sucks. It sucks. There's no two ways about it. It's awful. And it's easy to not have division when things are great, like where the Eagles are. Then there's probably still some division there. Naturally, there's always going to be differing opinions. But sports used to be about talking about it, hearing somebody else's opinion, and then you giving your opinion and having a civil conversation about it. Those days are just gone. They're gone. You can do that with some people, but some of these people you can't do it with. And division is toxic. And that's the thing that sucks about this rebuild. Now, if they rebuild up and turn into a really good team, you can question decisions made along the way and debate them and have rational debates. That's what makes sports great. But this toxicity, it's just, it's unfortunate. And it makes me not even want to open the Twitter app and read what it has to say. Where I used to go to that to have those conversations and debates. It's too toxic now. And it's just, I don't need that. When you're faced with your mortality and you're dealing the battle that I'm in right now, I don't want to waste time with that toxicity and irrationality. If you want to have a non-emotional conversation, an assessment, and debate, I'm all for it. These toxic conversations, they blow. Everybody, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll break down Flyers Senators tomorrow. Danny Briere joins us on Thursday's episode. We'll talk to the GM. Join us next on a brand new Flyers Daily.